So eventually what happens is that the government is the most successful group of gangsters.
How's it going?
Good evening. Good evening. How's it going with you, sir?
Good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear us all right?
I can hear you guys. I just have a USB mic this time. So
that's fine. You sound good.
All right. Good deal.
All right. So thank you so much for accepting our invite onto the podcast this evening.
Absolutely.
Great to connect with you. Obviously, you had me on Badger State Resistance before, and that was a really great conversation. I feel like there was a lot of really productive points brought up and a lot of opportunity to, kind of connect between different political ideologies. So that was pretty cool.
Right.
I kind of wanted to start out tonight by allowing you the opportunity to give us a little bit of a background, not only on yourself and what inspired you to become an activist politically, but also, where did Badger State Resistance as an organization, as an entity kind of form from?
All right. So my name is Justin. I'm originally from Arizona. I served 4 years in the Marines, spent 5 years on the local fire department here in Howard. I have 2 kids, beautiful wife, just got married a month ago, a few days.
Congratulations.
Woo! Thank you. And then, so as far as Badger State and where it all came from, so after watching the November 3rd election, me, along with, 75 million other people, were quite pissed at what happened. And it wasn't that I was pissed that people that think differently than me won an election. It was how the election was won. And at that point, I realized, I was a little scared, to be honest with you. I mean, like, if this is how we're going to allow, our government to continuously run rabid, I have to speak up. I can't be quiet anymore. So decided to start a podcast. My wife laughed a little bit because, the first podcast was about AOC and
Sure.
We actually named the podcast episode AOC and cow farts. Yeah, an issue with the cow farts. So my dad and I sat down and did it. And then, a couple weeks later, I ended up having Jonathan Wickman come on, and it's been all uphill from there. So our social medias, TikTok especially, grew like crazy, 23,700 followers within about a week. And then Facebook was growing like crazy. And then all the conservatives, and I'm sure you actually got banned as well, being Libertarian. I don't know if you did or not, but we all kind of got shadow banned.
Yeah, we got shadow banned, not outright banned, but shadow banned.
Right. So we got shadow banned. So we grew from about 105 people that were following the Facebook page to 23, maybe 2,200, whatever, overnight. I mean, I woke up the next day and I was like, Tori, look at this. And, the last week and a half, we kind of got on shadow banned, and we're growing pretty rapidly now. So,
yeah.
So that's kind of the backstory
awesome.
of Badger State. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting too that lately it does seem like they kind of pulled back a little bit. I've heard that from a couple of other people too who had noticed a lot of the shadow banning taking place, and then lately they've been seeing more of an uptick in their traffic, and so it's very interesting. Yeah. They just need to, qualm everybody during the election cycle. But it was crazy because literally in between, I would say, July and September, our posts were reaching like 40,000 people. We were, we had such a huge outreach for a while there. We were getting like 20, 30 new people liking our page a day. Like it was getting really fast. And then all of a sudden, middle to late October, it was like dropped right off, almost no traffic, almost no outreach. Like it was like, what the heck,
Luckily, I think the podcast sites, because I was still getting the traction on the podcast sites, especially like right after January 6th, I was getting 300 downloads and subscribers across all of them. And actually, we have a huge listening base in Ireland. I don't know why that is, but hey, shout out to Ireland. So
yeah, hey.
I think we were still reaching the people we needed to and talking with the people that we needed to.
Absolutely.
Luckily, our voice will not be silenced forever, and because we are going to continue to make it very loud for those that would see the First Amendment right trampled upon.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the main point too that you brought up earlier with why you started Badger State. Is very, it's similar to why a lot of people get into the trenches of the war, that's really raging right now against individual liberty. And a lot of people are inspired by different things. And as long as you're still getting out there every single day and spurring those conversations and doing everything you can, right, then you're doing, your part in that battle in a sense. It, for us, we as libertarians, you mentioned that it was the credibility of this last election that kind of had triggered you to really wake up to the corruption of the political system, I guess. I'm not sure if maybe before that you were aware or awake to some of it. But there, obviously libertarians, for instance, have dealt with 50 years of being kept off ballots, being kept off debate stages, being kept out of media, being kept out of polls. In some states, you literally can't even run you have to get 50,000 signatures in the state of Tennessee or more. I think it is like 56,000 signatures to run as a libertarian, but you need 25 to run as a Republican, or a Democrat, or even as an independent, to be honest. So it's very, we are used to being in a political system that is completely corrupt and designed against any other voices, to in any way, shape, or form get into the mix, and it's not just us. There are many others.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, absolutely. Anybody that wants, in my opinion, Joe Jorgensen should have been on the main stage during the presidential debates. Don Blankenship from the Constitution Party should have been on the stage during the presidential debates.
What's his name, Howie?
Yeah, Howie from the Green Party too, I would say. Yeah.
Howie. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I guess our stance is like, if you're statistically able to pull off enough of an electoral victory to win the presidency, then you should be on the debate stage.
Absolutely. And a lot of things opened my eyes to a lot of different people at two different periods of time. So the November 3rd election really opened my eyes to the Washington corruption and just how deep the state really was. We're seeing right here in Green Bay, we have a mayor that's under investigation for possibly tampering with the Dominion servers or the systems by having had an individual with I'm drawing a blank. What do you plug into a computer? A
little USB, a flash drive?
A little flash drive. So, which could have changed the outcome of, who was being elected here in the Northeast Wisconsin area, Green Bay area. But then the corruption started hitting home because I'm a registered Republican. Okay, I've said this even at Jake's events, and when we saw all these Republicans start going and calling for, like Mike Gallagher, calling for, you need to go stop this, Trump, you're the only one that can stop this, and that really upset me. And then on top of it, all those Republicans that decided that they were going to go and jump onto this illegal impeachment when we already knew the guy was leaving. So just to waste taxpayer dollars. So I mean, it goes further than just the corruption of voting, but it goes with corruption of how much money are we going to continue to waste of our money that we pay into taxes. So so I've my fight started in one direction and moved to another direction. My whole goal for Badger State Resistance is to help people educate themselves better when it comes to electing government officials. And that's why I've jumped on the Jake camp, because I do think it's a better option than Mike Gallagher. And I don't even think Mike Gallagher is going to run for the 8th Congressional District. But I guess that's going back to the front of our start of this podcast. But
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one thing I think too that a lot of people are now starting to become aware of, and why I see such tremendous growth in the libertarian movement, in the liberty movement in general, and even in this, like I've even mentioned multiple times, in this split in the Republican Party. I think a lot of it is based solely on this idea that people are now aware that it's the local politics, your county board, supervisors, your city council members, your local congressmen, your assembly people. Like, it's those people that actually pull a lot more of the strings at home and that actually carry a lot more of the power and accountability, and those are the ones that we need to be holding to task.
Right.
The Capitol itself, and the entire establishment that exists there, that whole political swamp, whatever you want to call it, they've been there for 200 years. Right. There's no way at this point that we can just go in and storm in and take them out. We really, really, truly have to start on this grassroots level in our cities and towns and counties. And we have to hold these people to task. We have to hold them accountable and say, listen, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're tired of you, Mike Gallagher's. We're tired of you, Tony Evers. We're tired of you, we're tired of you, crony. Johnson. Yeah, Ron Johnson. These crony people that really, truly, maybe they started out with good intentions. Maybe some of them did. Maybe some of them went in there to uphold. But a lot of them, and I mean a vast majority at this point, care more about their pocketbooks than they do about the principles and liberty of the people they're supposedly representing.
Well, the biggest issue is the people in Washington, they work for their donors.
Yeah, the special interests.
Exactly. And one of the things that I would love to see happen, and obviously we have a convention of states that's starting to happen, and I'm very on board with this. I think they need to organize a little bit better and have a little bit, more in line exactly what they plan on doing. But we need our congressmen to be here at home.
Yes.
And working with the constituents of their individual, their districts. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not even opposed to going back to the state legislature, selecting our senators to send to Washington to do the work based on the people. This is how our founders wanted it. And we, I don't know what year it was. I could probably figure it out. But at some point in our history, we decided, okay, we're going to elect our senators by popular vote instead of allowing our state houses to do that. And I think that's a lot of where a lot of the corruption started and really spiraled out of control.
Sure. I mean, I can definitely say that I would acknowledge that's one of the components of the corruption, because there is, I think, a lot more facets than just that. I mean, because there's a lot of separation that is taking place between the people and the government itself. One of the main things the founders and the framers of our entire self-governance system, one of the things they really truly believed the most in was decentralization of power. They believed that the individual was the core of everything. The 9th and 10th Amendments that exist in the Constitution were essentially to outline, hey, these 8 amendments we outlined before, these are unalienable rights that absolutely no government grants you and absolutely no government can take away. And every single thing else we didn't list here, because we're not omniscient, we don't know everything. So everything we didn't list here is up to you. It's up to the individual and any sort of government they form at the state and local level, because that's where government is the most efficient, the most held accountable, is at that localized level.
Right.
When you get this giant, over-encumbering federalized government that literally, it's no different than having a king in England who's, mandating things across the Atlantic Ocean at this point. Like, that's how it feels to most people in this country, is that, our president's this big king in an ivory tower, and now there's even gates and guards protecting him, so, I mean, like, really, when it comes down to it, we're right back at the same place that the revolution was founded in, which is in this idea that truly each man, each individual human being is ultimately responsible for their liberty and their life. And there are collective boundaries that we set as a society. But ultimately, we cannot have a society that's based in control and coercion. Only societies that are based in voluntarism and cooperation. We can have towns, for instance. We could live in Sturgeon Bay, but the state of Wisconsin is a hell of a lot less accountable to me than the city of Sturgeon Bay is.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree that local government is definitely needs to be more. I mean, it should be more powerful. It was created to be more powerful, and that's why I'm actually pretty ashamed of our state that only 20% of the people actually turned out to vote on April 6th, because they don't realize just exactly how important county executives are, and city council is, school board.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys both have kids, so I mean, I'm sure, and I don't know if you homeschool.
We homeschool, yeah. So it doesn't, that part doesn't affect us as much.
Well, not only that, like, what happens when those who are running for the school board, or those who are running for different places of city council or whatever? What if they're not being representative by them? So then you have that, and then you also have the majority of the population who doesn't feel cared by the government, period. They just constantly feel screwed, so they don't even get involved with even local politics. Like, oh, okay, whatever, just another election.
I was actually
call me when the president election is here so I can waste another vote.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was actually something I was going to mention, is that, like, personally, I did not vote. There was not a single person on the ballot in my local area that I would have voted for. So what was the point?
I was gonna write in Ayn Rand.
Yeah, I would have went and write. I would have went and wrote in. But then again, that's a true wasted vote in a sense. So it's a protest vote.
Who was Kim Kardashian's husband? What was his name?
Kanye West.
Kanye. I mean, you could have wrote in Kanye.
Sure, yeah, I vote Kanye for my local school board. Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. Not only that, like, we don't even take our kids to public school.
Well, yeah,
so
exactly. So I don't want to control it. I mean, and that's where I feel like my role as as somebody who wants to step into a leadership role in the Libertarian Party, my role is to try and empower people that we can get on the ballots so that people can feel represented. And then, to her point, a lot of people do feel disenfranchised by politics, and a good reason for that is that a lot of these local politicians don't give a shit about them. They don't actually go out into their communities. They don't do any work. They don't volunteer. They don't meet the people where they are. They don't do anything for their communities. So a lot of these people don't even show up to vote, and only these party faithfuls will show up to vote. And a lot of the other people are like, well, I'll just, like she said, show up for the president because that's the big Super Bowl of the elections. And, I'm kind of like, I get ostracized more if I don't do that one. But I do feel like what our responsibility, as people who are activists and people who really do care about true liberty, is we need to help inspire people like Jake, like us, like you, people who truly care about liberty, to run for these local offices so people have somebody to vote for, and then actually form organizations that will go out into these communities and let them know about these candidates and about what they're doing, and have the candidates be part of it. I think that's why Jonathan Wickman, for instance, has gotten so popular so fast. Is because he has went out with the people. He's met people where they are. He's very accessible. Those are qualities and traits that are completely lacking in politics today. And
no, because that's a leader, not a politician.
Exactly.
Right. And we need to we need to actually start establishing that difference between politicians and actual leaders.
True.
This might sound crude, or rude in a way, but congressmen and women are errand boys and girls for the people of their districts. And,
sure.
And there are very few people in Washington that I would actually consider leaders. Rand Paul, I would consider a leader. I like Rand Paul.
Yeah, Thomas Massey and Justin Amash when he was in there, and Ben Sassy's been pretty good on some things, and there are a few,
but there's not many.
No.
But to your point on Jonathan Wickman, absolutely. I mean, he goes to the rallies. He responds very quickly to Facebook. I mean, any of your listeners that reach out to him, I mean, he's going to get back to you within 24 hours. And the man's got over 40,000 followers on Facebook alone.
Right.
So, and is incredibly busy. So he runs a small business. So yes, that is exactly what we need. That's why people like Jake would be very successful in a role in Congress, because I do believe that Jake would be more willing to work for the people and spend his time here in Northeast Wisconsin versus spending his time in Washington playing the lobbyist game.
Yeah, he doesn't really want to. He wants, right. He really still wants to have, his. He's
a community man.
He's a community guy, exactly. He wants his still connection to his community. And you're so right, and it's leaders like him. And for those of you who haven't met Jake was on the podcast last month, but he is such a tremendous inspiration just to be around. When you talk to the guy, he just inspires you to do great things. So having somebody like that in Congress and who's willing to sit down with people and listen to them, but also educate them at the same time, like, it's so crucial at this point.
Well, to give I'll give your viewers a little insight. So Jake is actually going to be starting his own podcast. I don't know if you guys have announced that at all yet.
Nope. But I haven't, at least.
Okay, well, sorry, Jake, if you didn't want me to say nothing, but hey, it's time. We need you to start speaking for the people. And but yes, so the Badger State Resistance is going to help Jake get set up. And obviously, I know, Tony, you're very involved. Both of you are very involved with Jake. So hopefully that podcast will start reaching people nationally to wake them up to where they need to start thinking differently when they vote. And I'm not saying, and don't get mad at me, I'm not saying that everybody needs to just run out and vote Libertarian.
No, of course not.
But people absolutely need to start looking at every single option that there's. We have 2 Democrats right now in the Senate that are saving our butts. Cinema and Manchin, West Virginia and Arizona, that are blocking this HR1 from going through, which would virtually destroy voting for all of us, no matter what. I mean, we would never get another chance. I mean, we are on a pathway to communism, and that is why we need to think different when we vote, and why we need to take our time and actually look at who these people are.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's ultimately why, there does need to be more voices at the table, because as we said previously in the podcast, if we would have had 6 different options up there on that debate stage, and you truly had the opportunity to see that Democrats and Republicans are mostly the same at this point. They've mostly bought onto this same corporatist, big government, big state, monopolized system that basically feeds them and, suckles from us. They pretty much are the same. And there are a lot of other opportunities and options out there that actually care a lot more about sticking to the principles of the people. I honestly, in my perfect world, I would love to see the Democrats and Republicans be the minority party. I would love to see the Constitutional Party, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, and maybe like what's that? I love the Bull and Moose Party for some reason, to be honest. And they're still present. I actually found that out this election cycle. I did not even realize they were still a party until this last go around. But apparently a bunch of disaffected libertarians joined them, and I was like, oh, that's funny.
I think if we got into ranked choice voting, you would find that the Republican and Democrat numbers would be lower than you could even imagine. Probably. And that more people would vote the party that actually represents them, and then their second choice or third choice would be Republican, Democrat.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I think one of the things that, we need to start here at the ground level, you and I and podcasters like Ben Shapiro, we need to start screaming that corporate lobbyists be removed from Washington.
100%.
Because then we can go based on the actual, I'm going to go off in a couple different directions here with this.
Go ahead.
These people, they buy their senators and congressmen in Washington. Okay, we've seen Mitch McConnell's been there for how long? Nancy Pelosi's been there for how long? Chuck Schumer's been there for how long? Maxine Waters, who, I'm sorry, she is a racist in my opinion, but
most if not all.
Right. These people are all funded by their corporate lobbyists that go there. I think if we remove that, then the American people will actually have a chance to actually see exactly what they're doing, and start removing these people, because these people aren't going to have the campaign finance to go and spend $2, $3, $5, $10 million in the prospective districts.
Yep.
So, and maybe for campaigning, exactly, because again, Joe Jorgensen had a $1 million presidential budget, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure
it was $3 million total. Yep.
Okay, well, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, we're probably, I don't know the numbers, but I'd be willing to bet it's $50 to $100 million. If not
I think it was somewhere around there. I think it was like 60 some million or something like that.
Right.
But
So
yeah, and actually too, Joe Jorgensen, Gary Johnson, the election cycle before her had 14 million. And that was because of a bunch of disaffected Republicans that were leaving because of Trump at the time. But like, you know, that was a tremendous, you know, historical moment for the Libertarian Party as far as fundraising went for a political campaign.
Right.
And unfortunately, you know, whatever.
Although I feel like Joe used hers a lot.
That's what I was just gonna say. Unfortunately, those funds were not used as nowhere near as efficiently as during this last campaign. But I do feel like in some regards, the overall pandemic and the lockdown and everything kind of gave us a bit of an edge and a bit of an advantage, because it gave everybody a bit more of a level playing field. Everybody was locked at home. No events were really happening. And really, the Libertarians were the only ones out having events, except for Donald Trump occasionally. You know, we like Joe Jorgensen traveled across the entire country, I think twice, and Spike did as well on a tour bus. And they stopped in like almost every single, you know, state in the contiguous United States. And actually they went up to Alaska. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like it was an opportunity for us. And it was a great time to grow our, you know, our awareness and, you know, our membership. And actually it did. Our membership grew by, I think, I don't remember what it was, I think 7% or something like that this last election cycle, which is pretty substantial overall.
Yeah.
And you know, another thing I try to give credit for as well is like this last election cycle, Joe Jorgensen gained about 2.2 million votes, opposed to Gary Johnson's like 4.5. And a lot of people were like, oh, you know, she did worse. But actually, I think technically she did better when you look at the actual statistics of where those votes came from. Joe Jorgensen's votes were strictly libertarians, essentially. They were people who, because in Gary Johnson's era, like I said before, a lot of Republicans broke from the Republican Party because Trump did come in and splinter things. A lot of the establishment rhinos that were there, a lot of the, you know, system, the people he wanted to get rid of in a sense, they were like, I'm not voting for you.
Right.
And a lot of them went Democrat, but some of them went third parties. And so we got a lot of that overflow, and even people that were more conservative and a lot more libertarian leaning, you know, were voting for him. He also was governor of New Mexico for 2 consecutive terms, extremely popular, and did an amazing job as governor there. And Bill Weld, who was his running mate, was a Republican, I think governor or senator. I can't remember at this. Governor, because there's the 2 governors. Governor of Massachusetts.
Okay.
And he was the governor of Massachusetts actually as a Republican as well, and had, you know, tremendous connection with donors and all of these things. So like the amount, and he got, Gary Johnson got on mainstream news and all of these things. I mean, they made fun of him and tripped him up and tried to make him look like an idiot, but he still got on mainstream news. Right. And, you know, this go around, Joe Jorgensen literally had none of that. She had almost no name recognition, almost literally zero funding, almost no backing. There was like even a lot of issues within the Libertarian Party and things like that that led to some splintering and blah, blah, blah. But like to still be able to pull off, and
I don't even think her numbers were accurate either.
No,
so
yeah, and actually you mentioned about...
I actually agree with that. So,
yeah, you mentioned we actually saw some of that stuff because there was people taking pictures from election night of numbers from like Pennsylvania especially, but other states as well, where Joe would be up by like 40, 60,000 votes, and then all of a sudden it'd be down to 20. And then our chair, who's actually a lawyer, the chair of the entire national party, he reached out to a lot of these states, and their excuse was that local ballot counters were getting Joe Jorgensen and Joe Biden's names confused.
Yeah, see, I don't believe that.
How could you? It's Joseph on the ballot. I on our ballot, it was Joseph Biden, and it said Democratic Party. And it says Joe Jorgensen, Libertarian.
And I don't even
Joseph
think they're next
was
to
all
each
the way
other on the ballot either.
Exactly. Joe Biden was at the top.
Yep.
Then it went Trump. Then it went Don Blankenship, and then it went to Joe Jorgensen.
Yep.
And I remember that from my ballot. So there's not that's not confused. And again, if you have accurate machines that are counting these votes based on a little bubble, why? I mean, how did anybody get confused?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So,
exactly.
Everywhere, all over the playing field.
And that's something I think that we can all agree on, and that's maybe something too that can help, you know, bring more people together through all political, you know, fringes, is that we need to figure out some way to have like a third party alternative accountability, you know, who watches the Watchmen kind of organization, or alternative voting system, that gets established, because the free market is typically the only way to go around anything. Right. So at this point, we have to be the ones to actually rise up and make a better voting system, or make a, some way to hold these people accountable.
I think we need to bridge together and get the League of Women Voters back on the table for holding debates.
However, yes, the only unfortunate side of that is that, as you are well aware too, there's a certain bias that it seems they may have grown with to a certain political side. I don't. Maybe not all of them, but sometimes it seems like.
I mean, either way. I mean, is there a way that we can create a better system to hold debates? You know what I mean? Like, I think we need to. Yeah, we need to start figuring that out. Let the inner free market figure that out.
So you're talking a better way of hosting debates. The best way that we can honestly do this is to starve the Beltway media.
Yeah.
CNN should not be watched.
Fox News at all.
Be watched.
No.
MSNBC absolutely should not be watched. That is a joke.
It's owned by Bill Gates. I mean,
right. That's yeah. I am a fan of Newsmax. Obviously, they're big Trump supporting, but they also did do a fair amount of coverage, if I remember, of Joe Jorgensen. And I actually have a lot of family back home in Arizona, and my family was split. Half of them voted for Trump, half of them voted for Joe Jorgensen. Sure. And either way, I would have been happy.
Mm-hmm.
This blubbering idiot that we have in the White House right now is I mean, obviously he's just a plant. We know that he's not the one that's actually running the country.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The media is actually the ones running the country with all this wokeness and craziness that we see going on right now, and these crazy bills like HR1 and all that other stuff. But if we stop allowing the mainstream media to gain the viewers, and if we as people and citizens stop watching them, it's going to force them to have to make different approaches on how they report things and who they bring on. And if we use alternative media like you and me, and Jonathan Wickman has a podcast, Jake's going to have a podcast, and there's YouTube media now that's bipartisan, that we could start working to try to get the candidates onto those sites. That is going to create a more fair playing ground for people. But the only way that's going to ever work is we would all have to stop watching that mainstream media. Otherwise, this is going to continue to be the same thing.
Well,
it's dying out.
Exactly.
I think it really is.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think honestly what's going to happen is you can't force. There's a lot of us, like I haven't watched mainstream media, and I literally can't even tell you how long it's been so long. So like you can't force those who otherwise will ingest it anyway. So one of the things that's kind of happening anyway, though, is that these older generations that rely on that style of media are, and for lack of better terms, dying out. And so I think that, as the older and elderly generations kind of move on and these younger generations come up, and we've all been raised with such a plethora of options for our media and for our information and everything, and we rely very heavily on the internet as a culture now. And I think that every step of the way, it's going to be the internet that unites us. Like a lot of the conservatives, they get united by guns, and a lot of the liberals, they get united by personal body choices and everything like that. But what will truly unite all of us is the internet. When they fully come and try to shut down our connectivity and all the things that we rely so heavily on the internet, I think that's when it's going to be like, you have no power here. Are you kidding me?
Right.
This is our domain. There will always be a way, because honestly, the internet is literally just an interconnectivity of networking and computers. So you will always be able to find a way to get around anything they try to do. I mean, we have a VPN, for crying out loud. That's so common now for people to have even VPNs and encryption and all these things like
private browsers.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
But Spike Cohen, actually, when he was on our podcast, brought up a really great point, which is that, with the current trend that you see technology and our society evolving towards, essentially these systems of control and authoritarianism are kind of just going to become obsolete to the point where they'll only exist on paper and then they won't exist at all, you know, because we won't really need them. Because at some point, our systems of person-to-person technology and person-to-person cooperation and voluntarism and everything, it'll be better. It'll actually supersede what they're capable of providing us. And even the socialists at that point, I think, will be on board because it'll be more direct, interpersonal. They won't have to rely on big daddy government anymore, you know. And so, like, to a degree, there's a level of almost like a waiting game. But at the same time, I think the government and the powers that you're describing, the people that are truly pushing for all this agenda to go through, I think they know that too, which is why they are working so goddamn hard right now to control absolutely everything they can and siphon absolutely all the wealth they possibly can and destroy any culture that's left in this goddamn country. Like, they are doing everything in their power right now. And I think it's because it's the last dying breaths. They know they're on the verge, you know?
Well, there's going to be a ton of backlash. You know, obviously we have a great culture in this country. We are the greatest melting pot. And you're definitely right. I mean, they are starving and trying to figure out how they're going to do this.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we do have bills that were passed even before Trump left. I think it was right after all the new Congress and Senate. I can't think of the actual bill name. Where section 230. Do you recall what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Gave all these big tech protections and all that stuff, and that's some of the biggest things that worries me, that because without a culture we will die as a nation. A big thing that libertarians talk about is open borders, and I've been talking a lot with Jake about that, because I think there's a big misconception to what you guys believe as far as open borders versus, the term open borders, just everyone free for all come in. That's not what you guys are saying, but I think gosh, I go off on, I'm sorry. The open border thing, that from my understanding, the libertarian stance is let's open up immigration, right? So
yeah, and you're saying with the cultural melting pot, I think is what you were saying.
Correct. Yes. Establishing everything. Sorry, I go in 50 different million directions, but the cultural melting pot that we have in this country is what makes our country so great. Because me as a conservative, I could care less if you're gay or trans. I don't care. If you want to get married, that's your business. That's not, as long as you don't try to push it onto me, forcefully. Then I don't have a problem. You do you. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah, well, hey, I think, but I think a lot of
that is definitely not a Republican stance. That is not been the Republican stance at all legally. Let's just be clear on that.
Right, but a lot of the younger generation Republicans feel that, and I think that the right side of the Libertarian Party is probably where most of us fit in.
And that's a lot of people don't understand the actual dynamic of political belief. Right versus left exists in the libertarian dynamic too, because the actual libertarianism is not on the spectrum of right versus left. It's actually authoritarianism versus libertarianism, and you have right versus left within that spectrum. Mm-hmm. There are left-leaning and right-leaning libertarians, on the entire spectrum, and everybody kind of has their own little belief and their own personal take on it all. But what really comes down to, and what it's funny, you talk about this young generation of Republicans, you're talking about libertarians, Justin. They just don't know it yet. Because ultimately, libertarianism is liberty. It's no more control, no more authoritarianism, no more coercion. Let's get back to you decide your own life, like you just outlined. If you want to be gay, you want to be trans, you want to smoke a blunt, you want to whatever, you want to be a unicorn, whatever you want to be what do they call those, a furry, like whatever your little subculture, whatever your niche is, whatever your belief is, do it, as long as you are not imposing it on somebody else, not hurting somebody else in the process, and not impeding on anybody else's life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness while you're doing it. You're totally fine. And that is libertarianism. It has been since 1971. We have been the only political movement
it
that's
has
been
been since forever.
Well, 1776. It's been since the revolutions in Europe. It's been since earlier. This call for liberty has been embedded in human spirit for longer than any political movement has existed in this country. And the founding fathers truly understood that. That's why they wrote the Constitution, the Declaration. That's why they wrote these founding documents, was because they understood something and said, hey, we want to pass this on so that other people don't forget this, because it's kind of important, you know? And we as a people right now need to get back to that sentiment. And I think the more that we start dissolving these political labels of Republican and Democrat, the more we start understanding that this is authoritarianism versus libertarianism. We're now in a realm where the veil between those two parties has grown so thin at this point, it doesn't really even exist anymore. Joe Biden just got in, said he's going to finish the wall, has more kids in camps than Trump did, and is now recanting on his promise to decriminalize legalization. You know, like, what?
Continued those wars.
He literally started bombing people again. Like, how is he any different than what the Republicans did before he came in there? How's he any different than, you know, it's literally just this.
Then the Democrat before him.
Exactly. Obama was the same. George Bush was the same. Bill Clinton was the same.
Yeah, the thing of it is, like, libertarian is an umbrella term. You know, like, everybody fits into it. If you have the sentiment of, I just want to live my own life and let everybody else live their own life, then, like, you're for liberty and you fit under the umbrella. The umbrella is big enough for you.
Yeah, definitely. But that's what makes Jonathan Wickman actually such an awesome candidate for governor. So he's totally ready to have the conversation about legalization of marijuana. Now, I'm going to say that people that want to go smoke and, you know, and drive, I'm not for that. I mean, if you want to smoke in your house, I don't give a shit. I don't smoke only because of my job, to be honest with you. But you know, I do think that there should still be laws, but I don't believe that the laws should. I mean, I have heard your story. My wife's actually got an insane story about, you know, very similar to what you went through. But the federal government needs to be worried about following the Constitution. And going back to Jonathan Wickman, that I think there's a lot of libertarian in Jonathan Wickman, but still holds the very strong conservative value, you know, based on religion. I would really place him in between that Constitution and Libertarian Party.
I will say there are Christian libertarians. It's actually a whole thing.
Definitely.
But yes,
right. Yes, I know. And my cousin is one of those. So
Yeah, sure.
he's a very strong libertarian, big Stossel guy.
Stossel's
Woo!
awesome.
Yeah, he does. He
Love
loves
Stossel.
So, and he wasn't so much into the religious space until he met his wife, and then his wife got him there. She actually moved from the Democratic side to the Libertarian side, so they were both big Joe Jorgensen fans during the presidential election.
Sure.
And yeah, so again, it goes back to voting differently. It's knowing our candidates.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about whether it's right versus left. It's about principle, and
Freedom
that's one of the
versus
things.
force.
Exactly. And again, I'm not for a lawless nation, but I am for a, like you said, under that libertarian umbrella, you know, if you want to do something in your home, as long as you're not harming other people, do your thing. I don't think that the people should, you know, the taxpaying citizens should have to pay for any of it, you know, and we can go into discussions on Narcan, you know, for me being on the fire department, but my biggest thing is just voting different. We have to vote different.
Yeah, and there are actually some things I would love. I can't wait till Jonathan's on our podcast, because I'm going to love to talk to him about a few things that I feel like are going to be true test to see, in a sense, you know, how far down that liberty train he goes. Honestly, I think one of the things you brought up earlier, and this is one of the topics that we got a little debate. It got into a little bit of a debate down in Green Bay, but it's a very important topic, I think, to continuously reiterate, because it's something that I think the right needs to swallow. It's a pill the right needs to swallow. You need to swallow this big time. So you all were drinking that night. You all had beer in your system, or alcohol of some sort in your system, and drove home. And all of you claimed you were responsible enough to do that because you knew your limit and knew that you weren't going to get too drunk to be a danger to anybody else on the road. It's quite literally, as somebody who's an experienced medical cannabis user, it's quite literally the exact same thing. I would never use any amount beyond the point where I would feel safe on the road at all. But I definitely have been on the road under the influence of cannabis because literally it lasts for hours sometimes, and the effects are different. They're different for everybody. So just like alcohol is. So like, you can't say like, oh, I'm okay with laws that say you can't be under the influence on the road, but I'm going to drink a beer and I don't want the police officer to pull me over on my way home because I was safe. I was fine. The whole point I brought up that night was I got pulled over drunk after driving a more drunk person home. I made it to my destination, got pulled over in front of my destination. I did not pass the sobriety test for a couple of reasons. It was a blizzard, and I literally was, I was drunk. I had too much to drink, and I was over the legal limit. So obviously I blew in the breathalyzer over the legal limit, but I drove home safe. I caused no ruckus. There was no victims. Literally, I created no victim between me. From the bar to the house I made it to, there was 0 victims created. And yet the state, my tax dollars, paid a police officer to enforce a law against me that created a victim out of me. I paid over $8,000. I lost my license for years, had to jump through loops. I went to an AODA counselor, admitted that I had a problem at the time, but I dealt with it and actually overcame my addiction to alcohol. And because I admitted I had a problem, they sent me to further counseling and made me pay more.
Although he had been sober for over a year.
I actually took a sobriety. Yeah, at the time I was sober for over a year. So like, and I admitted that. I'm like, I'm not totally sober. I realized I had a problem. I needed to take a break. But because I said I realized I had a problem, but I kept drinking, I had to take further classes. So what I'm getting down to here is, when it comes to the cannabis conversation, when it comes to a lot of these conversations that I think a lot of the right has a bit of a hard time fully going all the way with, you have to understand, if there is no victim, there literally is no crime. If I didn't hurt anybody, then what's the problem?
Here's where I'll agree but disagree with you, and I'm okay with swallowing the pill, right? I'm okay with knowing your limit, right? If you feel that you can drive high or drunk or whatever, right? Any person in this country, right? Okay. So, but here's where I would say, if you are pulled over by a police officer, and let's say that they give you a sobriety test and you fail that sobriety test, okay, and obviously there would have to be science and studies and all kinds of craziness that goes into it. I don't care really what level you are, as far as your alcohol level or high level or whatever it may be, okay, as long as you are driving safely. But when you're swerving, like those people that get to that obliterated intoxication amount at a bar, okay, I do think that the bartender does have a responsibility to cut those people off, number one, because they do publicly endanger society, which would then violate the Constitution, right? Yeah. And so if we could come up with an idea where we say, okay, well, you blew a 0.09, the legal limit's 0.08, but you're driving straight, you're not becoming a threat to people, you're not speeding or whatever, and this is just going based on alcohol, because they shouldn't be pulled over, right? If they're not showing that they're a threat. But the second that person is swerving, okay, and running a red light or whatever, and they get pulled over and they get caught with those heavy amounts of intoxication, whether it be a drug or an alcohol, alcohol is a drug, but whatever the substance may be, I do think that we have to protect people at that point.
Yeah, I don't think you're disagreeing with me, honestly.
No, I'm not disagreeing.
At that point, I think at that point, what you're saying is they're displaying an actual, legitimate, and observable danger to the public safety, to other people and themselves. Correct. And that's, I'm totally not against that. And I don't think any libertarian is. I don't think any anarchist even truly would be against that in a sense. Hey, if somebody's acting a fool, you check them. That's really what it comes down to. And I know that you and I, the difference of principle, you really hold the Constitution to this, where your principles kind of lie. Mine comes from the NAP, the non-aggression principle. You don't hurt people and you don't take their stuff. Right. And that's kind of what it comes down to. Even if you're swerving all over the place, you could crash into a building and now you've destroyed thousands of dollars worth of property value, and who's responsible? But that's where it comes down to, again, the victim equals the crime. So if I've harmed somebody too, or if I'm about, in the literal process of about to be harming somebody, I should definitely be held accountable for those actions. That's libertarians, just to be clear, do not believe that, you know, there should be just utter free-for-all lawlessness in that way. You know, it's more like, how about we wait until there's an actual situation and then hold the person accountable for their actions, instead of creating these situations where we trap otherwise innocent people into places where now they're criminals and we extort them for money, and, you know, now we lock them in cages and we ruin their livelihoods and all of these things. You know, there are so many people in this country that are literally just going about their daily lives doing absolutely nothing wrong, and then the big government comes along and ruins everything for them.
I don't disagree. So again, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I again, you know, that person that is showing, when you're a 0.15, you know, that level of alcohol, you're not driving straight anyways, but a 0.09, you know, 0.1, depending on the person, size of person, really, a lot of that comes into factors.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I feel like we should get away from the science of it, because there's so much variable to it that you can't, it's almost impossible to say, well, we should set it at this number, because one person might register differently than another person based on their body mass, based on their experience with alcohol. So like, and I know that when I went through AODA, they're like, no, those aren't factors, but it is 100,000. Everybody in the world that drinks alcohol knows those are factors. We've all experienced them. Everybody's seen that very small girl at the party who drinks half a drink and she's totally trashed out of her mind. And then you got that big 300, 400 pound football player over there who's back there chugging back out of the keg all night long, and he's still fine, you know, like absolutely fine. And it's not to, you know, ostracize anybody's body types. It's literally just observation and biology. So when
but you could also have that skinny girl who puts down a keg and she's still good.
Oh, yeah.
Because she has a different metabolism. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like so many variables. Yeah. So like, yeah. So really, I guess what I'm coming down to is it should be based on the observational factors. You know, like you crossed the line, you know, you were driving on the wrong side, you were up on the curb, you know, you hit a mailbox, you know, whatever, like observable factors that you can actually point to that somebody is definitely a danger.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a curveball in there too. What about texting and driving?
Yes, I believe 100,000%.
I agree with you. 100%. And I'm guilty of it. And you know what? If I
I'm definitely guilty of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that. So
I'm definitely better than I have been, but I'm still guilty.
I get after her all the time. That's why she's saying that.
My wife gets on to me for it, and it's like, gosh, because I manage a FedEx contract, and I got guys texting me all the time. Right. And then now with the podcast, I'm always getting people messaging me for other things. And yeah, I mean, I can agree that the no victim, no crime, as long as we have that set standard that if you are clearly a danger, then you are going to endanger the public.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like with the gun conversation, to be honest. If I have a gun at my side at the ready at all times, I'm not a danger to anybody unless I take it out and I'm directly pointing it at somebody, right? You know, and then at that point, if I'm directly pointing it at somebody, I should be held accountable and dealt with, whether that's somebody lethally taking me out or a police officer, you know, trying to intervene and take me out or arrest me or whatever. Like, it's the same conversation essentially as it is with guns. Guns are not dangerous as they are, you know, and anybody walking around with a gun is not dangerous as they are.
I would argue people are safer when more people are carrying guns.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from somebody who's a medical cannabis patient, I'd argue more people would be calmer, saner, and more balanced if everybody had a little bit more cannabis in their diet.
right, you know.
And honestly, I mean, many people out there might not even know you don't even have to get high to have cannabis in your diet, and I still think that it could have tremendous benefits in our society, just from the medical information and you know, research and such that we've done, you know, overall with it. But it's just funny, you know, I like to try to bring those kind of parallels because really I know that conservatives, I know that the right truly does understand individual liberty. I think there are just some things in their own personal belief systems that they have a hard time accepting other people doing. And that's those are the areas where you have to I get it, it's fine. But think about this. You don't want somebody coming into your life and trying to dictate those things for you. You know, like you wouldn't want a Muslim coming into your life telling you couldn't practice Christianity. So why are you trying to tell them they can't practice, you know, Islam? You wouldn't want a non-gun, you know, enthusiast coming into your house telling you can't own guns. So vice versa. And then, you know, drugs and all, religion, it literally can go a mile, every single belief system that exists. And so we just got to have mutual respect. We just got to get down to the basics of why can't we just leave? There are terrible people in our society. I can name the biggest one. I brought it up on your podcast, pedophiles. There are terrible people in this society that if we just put our peddly little differences aside and actually focused on the real evil that exists, the cronies, the predators, all these people, we literally could have such a better, more beautiful, more safer society for everybody else.
Absolutely. But it goes back again to, you know, the corporate pocket, you know, the pocketbook. Okay, big pharma. How many politicians, both Republican and Democrat, have big pharma in their pockets? Okay, so that's where you're gonna get the pushback on legalization of marijuana. We'll just use just that, and then again, all this other stuff that we're talking about. Again, I mean, even Walmart, you know, Target, all these big corporations, they have these politicians. Amazon, big one. So,
Amazon and Google own the world. Amazon, Google, Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. Billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people underestimate the true power that they actually possess over the direction and trends of the nation. You know, they own the media, they own the legislatures at this point, and you know, they kind of are the shadowy hand that's directing a lot of the things, along with a lot of the old corporate donors that have been around, like George Soros and, you know, the Rothschilds and the, you know, the big banking elite and stuff like that. They're still definitely ingrained in all of this, but I think there's a new class of elitists that has really arisen out of the tech, you know, giants, and this they're really getting a big ego in a sense.
They all look robotic too.
Mark Zuckerberg is an android. You can't convince me otherwise, I think, at this point.
I don't even want to get into Mark Zuckerberg, but
we could say that for another podcast, right?
Yeah, we'll save that because I think that we could probably eat up about 2 hours on him.
Yes, we could.
Not a fan.
Actually, I did see. We'll leave out with this. I did see that Jonathan Wickman actually had made a call out to anybody that had, you know, experience and skills with making another social media platform. I love the fact that he's putting that call out there. And it's something I think that, like, somebody like Elon Musk should just come along, you know, and put their power and money behind something like that, you know, because, like, there's a huge market potential for one. And I don't think Trump's, I guess there's, you know, the rumblings of Trump social media. I don't think that's going to get off the ground in a way that's going to make the impact I think that's necessary. I think it's going to be more like an echo chamber, kind of like Facebook is becoming for the left. You know, and I feel like what we need is a true and open platform where literally all voices and all people can commingle and all these ideas can exist. And there's not all these rules and restrictions and, you know, algorithms, because the algorithms are what end up creating the echo chambers and what end up creating all the destruction and divisiveness in the social. We need to get rid of all that and just go back to the basics of what it used to be, you know, which is person to person. That's really where the connectivity and the power comes from. So I'm glad that he's doing that, because actually I was reading his outline for it, and that's kind of even what he was thinking is like person to person, you know, social media, more open, transparent, accountable. But there are other people even in the libertarian movement, you know, there are similar things. So I'm really excited to connect with him and, you know, kind of talk with him moving forward, you know.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna like him. Are you gonna try to make the event in Green Bay?
I do believe you. Yeah, I do believe I'm gonna be there. I saw it's actually only like $5. I might have to bring my kids, so that's the only caveat.
Hey, I was at the one in Appleton and there was kids there, so
awesome.
I definitely recommend that you guys make it out to that event. I'm actually going to be one of the speakers.
Yeah, I know that.
But you guys will love Kyle Hughes from Recipes for Freedom. Yep. He's great. He talks a lot about the unalienable rights of people. Goes into a lot of detail. You know, Dr. Flynn. He is fantastic. This whole coronavirus thing that's going on.
Oh, I love him.
He's great. So, and he's been canceled a lot, as you know, by people in Washington on the left, social media. They've canceled the hell out of him because
by people in Green Bay, even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We were battling. You know, we run Libertarians of Brown County page, and we had shared a couple of Flynn's posts, you know, since it was prevalent to that area. And there were a few people that had jumped on there to debate us about his credibility as a chiropractor and taking medical advice and such. And so, you know, we had to kind of defend his honor in a sense, because we're firm believers, for one, in chiropractic, because it's literally no different than any other medical practice, for crying out loud. It's taking care of your skeletal system. It's no different than any other system in your body. But for two, the man himself has a tremendous resume in, you know, immunology. He's going to study right now in college, you know, going back to college to study immunology, and just his general practice and experience with patients. You know, and from our experience with chiropractors in general, you know, there are tremendous chiropractors out there who truly do care about the human body and physiology, and actually getting to know their patients, and not just prescribing medicines, but getting down to the root core of problems. And so it's cool.
And they seem to be the only doctor that tells you not to come back. Please, I hope I don't have to see you.
Right.
Please take care of
Let's
yourself.
actually fix you.
Yeah, please take care of yourself so I don't have to see you every single week.
Yeah.
You know, like.
So yeah, it'd be great to see him. I've never seen him in person, but we did watch a lot of his live streams and such. And
you'll love him. He's
Jake
hilarious.
talked highly of Kyle as well from Recipes for Freedom. So I'd be very interested to check him out, meet with him, talk with him. I wouldn't mind having him on the podcast as well if he does that sort of thing. But
he does. He came on Badger State. So when you guys are there, definitely connect with him, because he does go on podcasts. I mean, he's great. Awesome. And everything that he talks about makes perfect sense, and it scares the people of Washington. It scares the hell out of Washington.
The message of liberty does, because what they don't want is people actually thinking for themselves, feeling for themselves, and being powerful themselves. You know, once we are empowered individually, they no longer can control us, and that's what they fear the most. And I think they know that movements like this and all the little, you know, grassroots splinters that exist around it we're changing things. We're actually making a difference, and we're swaying the tides of their little system, and they don't like it because they're afraid we're going to flip the board.
We are. It'll happen.
Yeah, we are. It's literally imminent. It can't be avoided.
More and more people are waking up to the reality that government is just a piece of paper.
Well, and you know,
set it on fire with our torch.
What it gets down to is that torch. It's the torch that's literally been carried now for humans since the moment it was first lit, which is that, you know, that feeling of liberty and freedom, that feeling of being able to create your own prosperity and literally pave your own way in this world, and nobody else can tell you otherwise. You know, and we're getting back to that point because our modern amenities, they made us complacent. They might have made us a little dumb. They might have made us a little fat. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't separate us. They brought us all together in a way that I think was completely underestimated, because now people from all across the world, like you and I, can connect in a way that we would have never been able to do before. You know,
Bernie Sanders said in 2016, during the 2016 campaign, that we are in the midst of a political revolution. Little did he know that it wasn't in 2016, but it is in 2020 that is happening. Not probably the idea that he had in mind, but we are in a political revolution at this point. And
probably not in the idea that the duopoly had in mind either.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
And ultimately, I think too, I would argue that my camera's a lot of focus here. Ultimately, I'd argue too that the political revolution, I think, started around the early 2000s. Ultimately, I think when September 11th happened, and there were a few different camps of people. There were the people that got really fearful, you know, and they grew, you know, worried over the state of the world. There were the people that grew very distrustful of the government, and the people that may have understood some of the more truths to that whole situation that existed out there. And then there were the people also that thought that the government didn't do enough to protect us. And then afterwards, this entire war on terror that's now proceeded for 20 years has absolutely ravaged like tons of different areas across the globe. It's sucked our prosperity dry. They've taken away so many of our liberties in the process in the name of fighting for terrorism and all of these things. So I think that was the moment that it really started to wake a lot of people up in a way that was irreparable. And now it's just snowballed from there. And now you have all of these different people, and it happens now every single election cycle. And now in between election cycles, every major event, you have this huge awakening of people every single time one of these things happens. You know, you just in a sense woke up this last election cycle in a massive degree to a point where now you want to do something about it. We had that awakening last election cycle. where we're like, we need to do something about this. This is getting out of hand, and so like it happens in varying degrees. There have been people fighting this since the 70s. It's the libertarian,
Right.
I champion that for the libertarians. There was a group of people back in 1971. They were a group of disenfranchised Republicans that had decided that the Republican Party no longer cared about individual liberty. They were selling out to the big corporations, and that we needed to form a party that actually got back to the principles of the framers of the Constitution, and thus the Libertarian Party was born. And here we are 50 years later now, celebrating our half a century, and we're now in the final stage, I feel like, of actually doing something. I think that what happened in the last 50 years was a tremendous foundation to build up to our generation, this generation of activists, this generation of doers, to finally step in and take that torch and say, okay, I see what you did there. Now let us burn this thing down for you. Because it needs to be burnt down, and it needs to be relit back up the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Set a fire to the spider web and recreate anew,
Well, yeah, because it's crept into everything. Literally, the big state has crept into everything. The big government's into almost every facet of your life at this point. So you gotta burn it out. You're like a bad infection.
We need to vote different. We need to
vote everything different.
Everything. We need
and
to look at
if you are inspired to, run, because like I said, we need candidates that people can vote for. And if you're going to run, actually go out there in your community and meet the people, because they need to see your face and they need to know what you're doing.
Actually, you know what's going to be really cool? The LPWI is going to put on an event this summer to help recruit people, to help them understand what being an activist and a volunteer is in their communities, and what standing up and being a candidate. And Spike Cohen is going to come and join us for that. And we're going to put on a pretty cool shindig. So you should follow along and check us out. Maybe come to that. That's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of information and just a lot of direction. And I think what people really need to see is that libertarians actually want to do something, and we've been trying to do something, but the majority of us are like, just like the majority of everybody else, is like, just leave us alone. Like, technically nobody really wants to get involved in politics. They just want to be left alone and live their life. But can we do it with, like, can we get the bullies out of the room and then we can, hang out?
I was actually thinking too, I wouldn't mind inviting Jonathan to that event this summer, because I feel like,
I think that'd be great.
And especially too, so this podcast is going to air on April 23rd, which is the day before our convention here actually in the state. And I'm running for chair, as you know, of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin. And that's one of the things I think is the most crucial, is forming a Liberty Crossroads of sorts. I'm actually working on a marketing campaign right now that I'm building up that I'll be announcing in a few days. But I really want to bring together all of the lovers of liberty, no matter what corner they reside in, no matter what belief system you truly, connect with, because the system that is currently fighting against us doesn't care what belief system you are, encamped with. It doesn't care if you're Republican, conservative, Christian, libertarian, anarchist. It doesn't care. It just cares about growing its power. It cares about growing its wealth. It cares about continuing to erode everybody's individual liberties. And the only way that we're going to actually stop it is together. Mm-hmm. And we can argue semantics of individual choices in local communities later, after we defeat the giant behemoth that is big state.
I agree with that. So yeah, I mean, definitely keep me in the loop on that.
I will.
And I hope that we can come to a resolve in 2022 and get decent people into office all over the country. I mean, we're obviously working very hard here in Northeast Wisconsin, a Republican podcast, a Libertarian podcast, to unite under Jake and hope that we can get him into Congress and hopefully become a voice of reason, or just be a nay.
Absolutely.
Nay. I'm not spending, nay, all of that kind of stuff. So hopefully that'll happen for us. And Jonathan Wickman, I think, is by far the best candidate that, I mean, we know Rebecca Clayfish is going to run, but I don't think that she will top that curve against Jonathan Wickman, because he is pulling people from the Libertarian Party, because he's got a more interest in those unalienable rights that recipes for freedom. Kyle Hughes talks about. He is more for giving the state back to the people versus continue to play the corporate game with politicians.
Right.
So
absolutely, and that's definitely what we need to get back to.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely look forward to checking him out. At this point, would you like to plug some of your websites, podcasts? Where can people check out the Badger State Resistance? I'd love for to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, so on Facebook, Badger State Resistance. You can follow us on there. If you are a TikTok fan, it is at JFave, JAYFAVE. 87, yes, 87. And then we obviously we have a merchandise store, and that is the letteringmachine.com/BSR-Green Bay. I know it's long, but and then the last thing that we're working on right now is starving those corporate beasts. And shopping different. Okay, we want to pull. So we're working on a campaign now with another company that's a patriot company. They donate money to police departments, fire departments, helping people get children get adopted, which is a huge thing that we money, right? So that's shoppingdifferent.com/Badger. So those are the kind of the main things you can find us on. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And make sure to send me the links. I'll include them in the description so that people have a direct way to check all that stuff out. Also make sure to check out JakeLiberty2022.com. Justin is Jake's campaign manager and working really closely to help spread the word for him. And like he said, it's really nice and it's tremendously, I feel like, important. I honestly think that Jake has an opportunity here in Northeast Wisconsin to do something historic, and it's great to have so many people from different areas and perspectives working together to make that happen. So we greatly appreciate all of your help to do that as well. It takes a village.
Absolutely.
So
all right,
but we'll make sure to have you on again, and you definitely have a great evening, sir.
It's a great conversation.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Both have a great night.
You as well.
You too.
Get ready to remove the filter from your timeline. Get ready to break the censorship of social media. Get ready to support the grassroots alternative to establishment propaganda. Get ready for an authentic voice. Get ready to resist cancel culture. Get ready for free speech media. This is FSM.